sad day for college football and college football fans everywhere. There's no denying that. And Mike Leach was a pioneer, a pirate of college football and college athletics. He was one of the bigger faces in the sport. It was a tough thing to overcome in that situation for Zack Arnett. He was still the head coach of Mississippi State, though, and Lane Kiffin still hired him to be an analyst. I do think that it's a really good hire. Look, regardless of what you thought about Zack Arnett as a head coach, regardless of how he allowed Will Rogers and that offense to transition the way that he did, he's going to have nothing to do with offense. The only thing that he will have to do is how to stop offenses like Lane Kiffin. And to be honest with you, okay, I don't think that he was a bad DC, nor has he been a bad DC even in the SEC. I thought that his defenses played tough. I thought that they were very chaotic and aggressive at times on how they got to the quarterback. They had two linebackers. They're going to be NFL guys. They did a lot of things very, very well in Starkville under Zack Arnett defensively. It's a really good hire. But don't act like, though, that Lane Kiffin doesn't know what he's doing. The pettiness of this is absolutely amazing. Now, that rivalry, the Egg Bowl, is one of the more toxic rivalries. You could even say outside of maybe Ohio State, Michigan, Auburn, Alabama, Texas A&M, it is up there as one of the toughest, more bitter rivalries that you'll see. The good thing about this, too, is now you have Pete Golding, who has been in the SEC for a long time and is a great play caller, and so is Zack Arnett. You know, what's interesting about Ole Miss here and adding a guy like Zack Arnett, man, whether you like Lane Kiffin, love Lane Kiffin, or you hate him or despise him, whatever your feelings are about him, you got to give him a tip of the cap and what he has done this offseason on the defensive side of the ball. It is amazing some of the things that he's been able to pull off. Now, I think we did talk about Ole Miss a lot on Monday and our expectations for them. On paper, I think they are a 9-3, 10-2 team. They are extremely talented. The reason they're there is easily because what they did last year, winning 10 games in the regular season, guys, they got better. I mean, Quinshon Judkins leaving is a big deal, don't get me wrong, but on the defensive side of things, they got better. They just got better again by adding a guy like Zack Arnett. So tip of the cap to Ole Miss, tip of the cap to Lane Kiffin. Now you have two guys that know what they're looking at defensively and how to stop things. I think it's a big-time hire. The only thing that I will say here is I do wonder how much, Pete Golding leans on him. Was Pete a part of this? And I'm assuming he was. Did Lane talk to Pete about bringing in Zack Arnett as an analyst? Quite honestly, guys, and just being real, I don't think you could hire a better analyst than a Zack Arnett type. It would be like a team bringing in Dana Holgorsen as an analyst or Cliff Kingsbury as an analyst. Guys, you cannot, there's no analyst out there that has more experience of calling plays, even being a head coach, than guys like that. So good for them. I don't know how much better it makes them, but I do think it makes Pete Golding better from a play calling standpoint, which could make them more dangerous. So I would be interesting to see what you guys think about that. What are your thoughts on Zack Arnett being a part of that staff? It's going to be interesting. Rick says Lane is going to Lane. This is a classic Lane Kiffin move. I fully agree with Rick there. I mean, there is no more of a pettier coach than Lane Kiffin. And we're going to talk about Lane in a minute. Probably already should, because we're talking about Ole Miss right now. And we might do that. But the bottom line is, Lane has had a big-time offseason. And I don't think that you can deny him or them at this point. On paper, guys, they have had a better offseason, quite honestly. I could make the argument than anybody. Name a team, maybe Ohio State. The only other team that could rival Ole Miss on the offseason that they've had would be Ohio State, which, you're looking at this right now. I mean, I'm wearing the shirt. Adding guys like Chip Kelly, Will Howard, adding a guy like Quinshon Judkins, and quite honestly, hiring a guy like Sam Petito there to be a director of player personnel. I mean, guys, they recruit. Ohio State recruits at a high level, but Sam Petito's last two stops was at Georgia and was at Alabama. I mean, you think that that dude doesn't know a lot about recruiting now? I wish he would have been in Baton Rouge. That's a whole different story. A whole different topic for a different day, but it's the truth. 1A, 1B on who had a better offseason. Pick your poison. Pick your poison. Because Ohio State hiring Chip Kelly as their OC, guys, it's a big deal. Bringing in Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, the receivers and the young receivers, Jermaine Smith, already looking like the part and being a big-time receiver at Ohio State, it's a big deal. But Ole Miss is right there with them. Ole Miss is 1,000% right there with them. Like Pete Golding probably should be a head coach in the SEC right now. Some off-the-field issues limited him from being that. And I just don't, Ohio State as an example, they added big pieces on the field. No team, though, in my opinion, added better pieces from the portal more than Ole Miss. And it's interesting, and we probably should talk about this too. Is Lane Kiffin going to be there long enough to see this pan out? I mean, I don't know if you can make the argument that he is one of the best, if not the best, head coach in Ole Miss's history. I mean, you got Hemingway and, there's been a lot of good coaches at Ole Miss, but he's starting to get up there. He has another 10-win season. He gets to a playoff this year at Ole Miss. There's no telling what they could do there. I mean, guys, he's turned around the program. There's no denying that. Now, what is interesting if we're going to talk about Ole Miss is the Chris Lowe report from the day. Now, in case you missed it, let me give you some cliff notes on the ESPN and Chris Lowe's report from this morning. Now, buckle in, because I have been a conspiracy theorist. Some people have called me on this. Actually, it's just good sourcing. Listen to this. As I take a sip from the most the cup that everybody and their mama is looking for, literally on, this is my wife's, but she gave it to me for the show, so I appreciate her for doing that. Chris Lowe reported this morning that, and I don't even know if you want to say reported, but some of it is being reported from him, but he did an illustration on Nick Saban leaving Alabama and the domino effect that came behind it and what would have come behind it. Now, we obviously know what happened. Nick Saban told his administration about a year ago that he's thinking about stepping down and retiring, and that way that A.D. Bryan and Alabama and everybody in that circle could be on the lookout for the next head coach of Alabama, so they had a head start there. How that did not leak out, I do not know, but good on them for not leaking that part out. But in the Chris Lowe piece today, in the Chris Lowe reporting, it was interesting because he said that the only two coaches that Alabama really was going after, now stay with me here, was Kalen DeBoer at Washington. We obviously know that he was going to be the guy because he is the guy right now in Tuscaloosa. But it's interesting because the second guy that they were going after was Mike Norvell from Florida State. Now, in the report, Florida State officials, I'm assuming athletic department, boosters, whoever Chris Lowe talked to, there were a lot of people who thought that Mike Norvell was going to leave Florida State to be the next head coach at Alabama. Obviously, he stays. Florida State comes up with a really good contract extension. Jimmy Sexton pulling all the moves and moving all the strings like he's the godfather, like he's Don Corleone. Well, make him an offer they can't refuse. I mean, he pulling the strings. But the only two people that Alabama was going after was DeBoer in Norvell. What's interesting about this and where I want to talk about this on and where it goes back to Ole Miss is that Florida State officials were already preparing that if Mike Norvell left and went to Alabama, that they were going to go and do everything that they could to get Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin. Now, here's the interesting part about that. In the way that I think about it and knowing and covering coaching hires in the SEC, I would not be surprised nor shocked because everybody's got the same agent. Jimmy Sexton is the agent for everybody that was involved in this Alabama coaching search. This is 2 times in 2 years that Lane Kiffin's name has come up at big-time programs. Auburn last year, Florida State this one. What was the conversation like with Jimmy Sexton and Florida State officials that if Mike Norvell left, what conversation did they have with Sexton about going after Lane Kiffin? Because that would not have been released to Chris Lowe if Jimmy Sexton, Lane, and Florida State officials didn't have a conversation. Which brings me to my ultimate point here. I could be wrong, and this is strictly opinion. I think that the Florida Gators head coaching job is coming open. And we have seen Lane in back-to-back years and back-to-back seasons name fully being brought up at other places for being a head coach. Auburn, tons of people have reported and talked about this before they went after Hugh Freeze. That hire was on the doorstep of happening until some things late in the process, a report gets out, Lane Kiffin, it derails everything. You remember that story. I'm going to be very interested to see because I think the same thing that happened at Alabama, that their administration knew about a year before Nick Saban retired. I think that Florida is already preparing and probably already prepared and probably already talked to Jimmy Sexton about this, that they're probably going to fire Billy Napier if the season goes the way that they believe that it will. I think Lane Kiffin might be the next head coach, and I've been saying this for 2 months now on either this show, Ruffino and Joe show, or our national college football show. I fully believe Lane Kiffin is going to be the next head coach of the Florida Gators. Now, I could be wrong. Ole Miss could do everything they can to keep him. Maybe he does. Maybe they do, I should say. But when your name continuously comes up in these coaching searches, 9 times out of 10, that normally means that you want out. I don't care that Ole Miss has been able to put great contracts together for him. I don't care that they have been able to go out into the portal and bring in a lot of really good talent and recruits. Hell, we're going to talk about first-year expectations from Mike Elko in a minute. And he brought in arguably Mike Elko's best player that was on his roster when he got hired there, and Walter Nolan from the transfer portal. I don't know if the Florida Gators are serious enough and take this serious enough. I don't think that there's anything that Ole Miss can do from a money standpoint to keep Lane Kiffin. Because I think that the Gators are yearning for a winner. They are yearning to get back to the mountaintop that they've been on. And I think that Lane Kiffin is the guy to do it for them. I do think it's interesting, though, that Florida State was fully prepared that if Mike Norvell left, that they were going after and going to get Lane Kiffin. Do you know the rivalry that would brew in all of this? That if Mike Norvell stayed, like the chances, like Lane Kiffin could have been the next head coach of Florida State. But what if next year? What if in December? What if in December Lane Kiffin is in Gainesville as their next head coach? a year ago, you could have made the argument that he was going to be in Tallahassee. Chris Lowe reporting, and there's nobody. Let me say this about Chris Lowe. If you think that if I'm a conspiracy theorist behind all this, if you think that, Blake, you are completely talking out of your ass, then what dots am I supposed to put together in a Chris Lowe report from ESPN, who, guys, quite honestly, might be the most connected dude when it comes to big-time head coaches in the country. I know that Pete Thamel and all these other reporters that are national guys are highly connected too. Dog, if you think that Chris Lowe got all of that and is not more well-connected than anybody in the sport, boy, oh boy. But domino pieces and coaching carousel, it is one of it, guys. It's a money driver in my business. Just as an example for all of you who maybe it's the first time that you're watching the show. Coaching carousel brings people like me, a content creator, a sports guy, someone who does a show. Guys, we do 9 shows every week. 5 on AYS, 3 on Rafino and Joe show, and 2 now with the SEC. So that's 5, 3. So no, that's more than that. So 10 shows a week at minimum. Man, I do. Coaching carousels bring guys like me more money than anything else. I'll give you an example. When I was covering the Brian Kelly saga, or the Brian Kelly hiring at LSU when Ed Orgeron was fired, I'll be real with you. I've never made more money in my entire life than coaching carousel. Ever. Like, there's nothing that's ever happened that when a head coach is hired or fired or whatever it may be, nothing brings more money than that. And that's just the truth. The domino effect that happens when coaches get hired, fired, leave, go elsewhere, whatever, there's nothing bigger than that. Okay. Let's get to a couple of your questions here as well. Chance Babin and Sports Bar both say that Ohio State had the better offseason. I don't disagree with that. I really don't, because you can say the personnel that they brought in, like Will Howard, Caleb Downs, Quinshon Judkins, those are three dudes that I think you could just end the conversation there. Like, I fully believe that you could probably end the conversation there. But what makes Ohio State having a better offseason than Ole Miss is Chip Kelly. Like, it's not remotely close. I'm pretty sure that they've already started spring. Chip is running the offense. Ryan Day is out. I mean, like, look, the connection between Chip Kelly and Ryan Day is a magical one. They are really good friends, and Chip Kelly is coming here, who is the mentor of Ryan Day, and they're already starting and going fast and wanting to run up tempo. Like, Chip is happy as a lark right now. He said as much in his interview this morning as well with Ohio State. Guys, I'm happy as a lark. All I got to do is call plays and develop. That's all I want to do. Like, everything else, guys, I'm burnt out. Like, he didn't say this, and somewhat did in so many words. Guys, I'm burnt out. I want to call plays. I want to develop kids. This new day and age, I don't want it anymore. And good on him. And good on him for being honest. To be real with you, that ends it. Like, that puts the icing on the cake. That ends it right there as well. Anthony James says, Texas A&M just after next year, Ole Miss sucks too. Can you expound on that, Anthony? What do you mean by that? Chance also says, coaching carousel makes scum bag agents more money. I got to be real with you. I mean, Chance, let me ask you this. How do I want to say this? Is Jimmy Sexton really a scumbag? I mean, is he really a scumbag? I don't know if he is or he isn't. I don't know Jimmy Sexton, but he is the puppet master. When it comes to coaching carousel, he is a puppet master. He is Don Corleone.